Hi, my name is Dr. Muldoon, and I was asked to talk to you about my son's journey towards independent mobility. But before we get to that story, I would be remiss if I didn't first begin by discussing why he needs therapeutic help in accessing independent movement. And that is because he was born with a congenital CMV or cytomegalovirus infection. This is something I had never heard of, so you probably haven't heard of it either. It is a very common cause of disability in the US and actually causes more children to be permanently disabled each year than several other well-known conditions combined, and that includes Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, and spina bifida. So things that I'm sure that you have heard of, if not before you got to occupational therapy school, then in your training. And the other thing that you need to know about it is that it is preventable, especially if you take some simple behavioral precautions to limit your exposure to the body fluids of toddlers, who are the main vectors for this virus as it spreads to pregnant women. So what you want to do is avoid contact with saliva, and that includes when kissing a child. Just don't kiss them on the face while you're pregnant. Don't put a pacifier in your mouth. Don't share food, drink, utensils, or straws while you're pregnant. And don't share a toothbrush with a toddler or anybody else. And please ask your partner to do the same while you're pregnant. The other thing is to wash your hands commonly and often, but especially after changing a diaper, to avoid the contact with the urine of a toddler. My son's name is Gideon, and his story starts at his birth, which occurred at 39 weeks, which is full term, and after an uncomplicated pregnancy. But 18 hours after birth, he presented with signs of infection, and this is when everyone in my family learned about cytomegalovirus. We were transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit, where we stayed for about 6 weeks, and he was diagnosed and treated for a congenital cytomegalovirus infection. This is a OT evaluation from several years ago now, but many of the items pointed out here still remain true, even though he is just over 6 years old today. He is a severely involved child who's diagnosed with cerebral palsy resulting from congenital CMV. At this time, Gideon is still working to achieve stability in trunk, head, and extremity control so that he may progress to working on mobility. Highly skilled OT and PT are required to assist Gideon in the development of motor control and prevention of further limitations. And that's his OT evaluation. So I want you, before I show any images of him, to think about what a kid who has an evaluation like this looks like, and how they would present to your clinic, and how you might picture them to be if you had this information before they came in. Okay, so with that image in your head, I'll show you what he looks like today. And here he is in all of his happiness that he exhibits every single day. The first image is of him when he had surgery for a cochlear implant and a G-tube placement. This is his preschool graduation last spring. He's now in kindergarten, and this is us celebrating some family time at a local resort at the end of the summer. So he may have significant medical and therapeutic challenges, but we as a family definitely think he has no delays or limitations in personality, potential, or cuteness. But I wasn't asked to talk to you about how cute he is. I was asked to talk to you about his journey towards independent mobility. Gideon's journey towards independent mobility begins when he met his current OT, Melanie Konatzer, who works out of Advanced Therapy Solutions and also has a nonprofit called Believe Beyond Ability. And we had heard about her because we had already been in contact with her about an annual event that Believe Beyond Ability hosts in collaboration with multiple organizations, in which kids with limited mobility are fitted for and given an accessible electric chair, which is set up with switches so that they can move those cars in a socially and age-appropriate way, which is really fun for them and fun for their families to enjoy. But I was intrigued because I had also seen through Believe Beyond Ability's Facebook page that there were these tiny kiddos that were passing their wheelchair tests at the durable medical equipment company, and insurance was paying for these tiny power wheelchairs. And I thought maybe Gideon would like to do that. And so I called Melanie and I asked her what her criterion is for trying kiddos in those power chairs, and she said coming to Gilbert and trying it out in the gym where she works. And so on October 17th, which also happened to be World Cerebral Palsy Day that year, we drove from North Peoria to Gilbert to try Gideon in one of these power chairs. So this is a video of the first time that he ever moved independently on his own. So there's a few things to point out. The first is you can see that even though he doesn't have a lot of great head control, that she was trying him with head switches. And so these are called proximity switches. There's two. There's only two kinds of movement that he could make. It is to go forward and to turn. So you can see here that left is going forward and right is turning. She does not have this chair fit with a butterfly clip, so she's not controlling his movement here. He is. She's just holding him up. So you can see his face with the movement, and where he's heading for is actually the door of the gym to take the chair home. He's like, I'll take it, bye. So in order to stop, he comes off, which you can see here that he did there as well. He actually came out pretty good there with his head at the time. So he does have limited head control, and he had it at this time, but the reason why she tried that rather than switches at his hands is that the way she always explains it is that kids develop head control first. A typical kid does. So if we're trying to go for functional movement, and Gideon does have some functional control of his head, then why not try that for power mobility before putting a switch down towards his hands, which you couldn't see if he's trying to move, and asking him to kind of push a switch that he can't see and move somewhere else. That's just a lot of complicated steps that don't necessarily have to be involved in trying to get a kid to do something that hopefully is easy and fun and motivational for them to do. So at this point, we're trying to see if he wants to eat his food. So that's his blended smoothie there. I think I offer the iPad, which is usually the golden key to get him to do anything. But at this point, he must be hungry, so he's going for his smoothie.
Yeah, that's right.
So he's getting a little bit upset, but he is moving towards it on his own. And it looks like he's going to drive past, but he comes off the switches, and so he stops. And so Melanie's trying to see if he'll turn a little bit, if he'll go that extra route of motivation, and he does. So that's amazing. So that was his first time ever trying powered mobility, and he drove towards the door, and he drove towards his meal, which he was very motivated to want to eat. So after we saw that he was taking to independent mobility so well, we basically switched OTs right away so that Melanie could continue to work with him towards independent mobility. And he took to it really quickly because he was motivated, and because Melanie used the functional movement that he did have to help him be successful. So that moving wasn't a chore, but it was something that he could access fairly easily. So this is another video taken a few months after he had started with Melanie. So she's set up different items around the gym and asking him to drive towards what he wants. You can see his face just from moving.
Are we gonna go shoot some hoops? Then come get me.
So do you think he wants to play basketball? I don't know. Hard to tell.
Come on. Come on. And stop.
Stop by coming up off the switches. Right? So you can see how much he's improved even. I think this is maybe it's before he took his test, so it's less than a year after he started, and already the significant gains that he made, even in just his core strength and his head control, because he's motivated to do so. So after less than a year of training, on September 19th, Gideon passed his driver's test for power mobility using head switches in that chair that you've seen him practicing in. It was an independent test at New Motion, which is our local durable medical equipment company, in which an independent assessor set up an obstacle course basically, and Gideon had to navigate around different chairs and structures that were in his way. They gave him directions and asked him to go towards different things, and he passed. We then applied for his wheelchair. He picked out an orange one, that's his favorite color, and we got it without any appeal or any fight at all from insurance because he was doing so well with it. Unfortunately, also around this time when Gideon passed his driver's test, the physical therapist who had been working with him since we moved to Arizona had to move out of state. And so we were in the market for a new physical therapist and had a couple of different evaluations. And the therapist that we initially were going to work with, less than 1 month later, wrote a formal evaluation after she met with him for about 50 minutes. And in that formal evaluation, she recommended that he no longer receive physical therapy services from the state because Gideon, in her opinion, had no skills, was not capable of developing skills, and therefore she thought it was unethical for her as a skilled therapist to treat him because there was nothing for her to work on. And so I think it's important to think about that because it is an important part of our journey, and because it has implications for you guys as therapists in training when you do have people who have complicated bodies, that you make sure that you're treating the individual and not the diagnosis, and take that into account when you are meeting anybody for the first time, so that you don't discriminate against them based on their disability. Because I don't know anybody who thinks that any of this describes Gideon, and I think after seeing those videos that I've just shared with you, you would probably agree. So we did move on from that, and today Gideon can now navigate narrow hallways. He makes full turns, so that means 360 degrees because he does still just use the 2 switches for movement, and he also stops when motivated to do so. He was recommended for extended school year services for 2 years in a row because of his great breakthrough growth in the area of physical therapy and also orientation and mobility, which is a separate service that's provided to him at school. So he's doing so completely awesome with his power mobility training. And this is a video that was taken about a month ago, which shows basically what he is doing now. And you can see also the incredible growth he's had since starting this journey as well. But here he is in his own power chair, which is not a little bit, it's actually quite a bit bigger and quite more powerful than the one he had been training in before. So in this case, he's driven into the kitchen in the gym. So he is, Melanie in this case is kind of backing him up so that he's in a position where he'll have to make a 360-degree turn and then navigate a narrow hallway in order to get out to what he wants, which is the iPad in this case.
Get ready. Oh, my friend! Look at you, my
And so you can see the difference in just, she doesn't have to hold him up anymore. It's his own chair. He's navigating so much better than that first try. So that's Gideon's journey with independent mobility in a nutshell, and it's all thanks to this single OT who believed in him and who believes in all kids with complicated bodies and that they can achieve great things despite the fact that it might look different than you might initially believe. Here is an image that Melanie had taken after she achieved her goal of having kids pick every color in the rainbow of their power chairs, and it's just a beautiful image down at Papago Park. For a few resources, you can see here's a video link to the annual derby that they hold, and I know it was just held a couple weeks ago, and some of you probably participated in that as well. And then also you can follow her nonprofit Believe Beyond Ability through this website or also on Facebook. So thanks for listening to our story, and I will talk with you soon.